Listen to the sound of the streets in Paris and Brussels right now. Listen to the roar of diesel engines as thousands of tractors block the arterial highways of Europe. Look at the capital cities of the Western world, where the very people who grow the primary food supply are engaged in a bitter, desperate, and exhausting war against their own governments. Look at the American heartland, where generational family farms are being swallowed whole by corporate monopolies, and where inflation is crushing the spirit of the working man. The Western agricultural machine, once the gleaming pride of the modern industrial world, is breaking down. Its leaders are paralyzed. They are trapped behind the reinforced glass windows of their parliaments, entirely unable to control the chaos
This is Pan-African Media,
unfolding in their own
independent.
streets. They are losing their grip on the very foundation of their civilization, the ability to feed their own people without sparking a bloody rebellion. But now, I want you to look away from the chaos of the West.
Isn't preparing
Look
for
5,000
applause.
miles to the south. Look at the dry, sun-baked capital of Ouagadougou in Burkina
Country.
Faso.
It will target
Notice
the movement.
profound, almost haunting difference. There are no riots here. There are no
Showed up.
burning tires
Operation
in the streets.
Serval.
There are
Operation
no politicians screaming over each other in a divided parliament.
Decisions
There is
were
only a
outsourced.
quiet,
Strategy
stoic
was
military
in
leader sitting at a desk, executing a decisive historical stroke of a pen.
picture.
With
Controlling
absolute
its
calm,
budgets,
this
restricting
nation has just enacted a massive $900 million ban on genetically modified seeds and foreign agricultural chemicals. This creates an immediate, glaring paradox that the global media is terrified to talk about. How is it that the global superpowers are struggling to maintain order and feed their own citizens without corporate permission, while a supposedly fragile African nation is teaching the strong a
Munition
masterclass in
training
absolute
program.
sovereignty? Why is the West suddenly panicking over African soil? If you believe a nation's true power begins with what it grows, press the like button and stay with me, because what you are about to hear is the story of the greatest silent rebellion of our time. If this story moves you,
Mali's weapons
like,
deliveries
comment,
aren't
and
just for
subscribe.
Mali. Admit what's
These
happening.
narratives need
The
witnesses.
Sahel is walking
To
away.
understand the sheer gravity of this geopolitical earthquake, you have to look at the hands of two very different men living in two entirely different worlds. First, picture a senior biotechnology executive sitting in a pristine,
The Black Winter is
climate-controlled
coming.
high-rise office
Let's
in
talk
Geneva
about what the
or
Black Winter
Washington.
actually means.
He is looking at a spreadsheet on a glowing monitor. For decades, that spreadsheet has reliably projected billions of pounds in revenue extracted directly from the African continent. To these men, Africa was never viewed as a collection of sovereign
Millet
nations
managing Mali's
with their own
security
destinies.
architect.
It was viewed as a captive market. It was a place to dump patented seeds, chemical fertilizers, and proprietary pesticides. But today, that executive is staring at a catastrophic red line. $900 million of projected revenue has just been wiped out in a single afternoon. The captive market has just closed its doors. Now, look at the hands of the second man. His name is Usman. He is a veteran farmer in
President
the dry,
Assimi Goïta
unforgiving
understands
plains of the Sahel.
transforming from a
His hands are
defensive force.
calloused, cracked like the earth itself, and permanently stained with the red soil of his ancestors. For decades, Usman was trapped in a relentless, unforgiving cycle of debt. Long ago, his father and his grandfather farmed this land freely. They saved seeds from one harvest to plant the next. It was a tradition as old as the earth itself, a sacred cycle of life. But then, the foreign corporations arrived. They came backed by international aid agencies and non-governmental organizations with smiling
moved
faces
fast.
and glossy
moved-
brochures. They promised higher yields. They promised modern miracles. They promised an end to hunger. But the true cost was hidden in the fine print of the contracts. Usman was forced to abandon his native seeds and buy genetically modified, patented seeds from these foreign entities. These seeds were biologically locked. They were designed by scientists in white coats to be sterile after one harvest. They could not be saved. They could not be shared. Every single planting season, Usman had to return to the corporation, begging for loans to buy more seeds and the specific chemical fertilizers required to make those specific seeds grow. If the rains failed, he still owed the corporation. If the crop was destroyed by pests that the chemicals couldn't kill, he still owed the corporation. It was a sophisticated, modern form of slavery. It was engineered in Western laboratories and enforced by international trade laws. The corporations owned his harvest before the seeds even touched the dirt. This system stripped him of his dignity. It stripped his country of its independence. It turned the proud farmers of Burkina Faso into mere tenants on their own ancestral land, paying rent to masters they would never meet in cities they would never visit. Standing directly between these two
Timbuktu,
men,
Gao,
between the sterile
Kidal,
glass
Gone.
boardrooms of Geneva and the cracked red earth of the Sahel, is Captain Ibrahim Traoré. When Traoré looked at this system, he did not see a standard trade agreement or a modern development program. He saw a direct, existential threat to the national security of his people. He saw that a nation that cannot cede its own land is a nation that is already conquered. But Traoré is a different kind of leader. He is a pattern interrupt in the long, tragic history of post-colonial Africa. He does not hold loud, boastful press conferences to announce his defiance to the cameras. He does not travel to the United Nations in New York to give theatrical, weeping speeches, begging for fairness from the very people who profit from his country's poverty. He does not care about the approval of foreign diplomats or the polite, condescending applause of the international community. Ibrahim Traoré is stoic, quiet, and profoundly unbothered by the expectations of the West. Dressed in his standard military fatigues,
Weakness.
often with a simple
The
red
image of
beret,
Malian
he
soldiers
simply reviews the data, recognizes the blatant exploitation, and signs the decree. He severs the invisible chains of corporate colonialism with absolute, chilling calm. He is not acting as a politician trying to win an ephemeral election or secure a legacy. He is acting as a protector of the soil. He is telling the world that this nation will no longer rent its own survival from foreign masters. The soil remembers. It remembers the hands that bled for it, the voices that cried for it, and the generation that is finally reclaiming it.
because France
That silent
controlled
signature on
Mali's
a piece of
security
paper
architecture.
tripped a geopolitical wire 5,000 miles away. The stroke of his pen struck a fatal blow to a trillion-dollar corporate machine that relies on African dependence. And the reaction from the global elite was not just frustration. It was not a measured diplomatic response. It was absolute, unadulterated panic. In the corridors of power in Washington, Paris, and Brussels, the alarms are ringing. Classified briefings are being hastily assembled in the Pentagon and the State Department. Closed-door meetings are being convened at the headquarters of the World Trade Organization. Men in expensive suits are frantically pulling data on West African agricultural outputs, their brows furrowed in disbelief. You have to understand, they are not panicking over the loss of $900 million. To these massive globalist institutions, that sum is a rounding error. It is pocket change. What terrifies them, what keeps Western intelligence analysts and corporate board members awake at night,
Broke those
is
chains.
the nightmare
He
of the
redirected
domino
Mali's
effect.
proxy
They know
conflicts.
that if
They're
one
being
nation
equipped,
proves the miracle
trained,
of the West is a lie,
trusted.
the entire empire of influence begins to crumble. But the mine and the field was just
And
the
France
beginning.
called it
What
partnership.
Traoré did next
By
would send
20
shockwaves through every boardroom from London to Washington. How far was he willing to go to protect the sovereignty of his people? And more importantly, how far would the wounded empire go to stop him? The counterattack was already being planned before the ink on his signature was even dry. The globalist elite understand exactly what Ibrahim Traoré is doing. He is not just
You don't
changing
just
a farming
support.
policy. He is demonstrating that the corporate agricultural model is not a necessity for
Decades,
survival in the
Malian
developing
soldiers
world.
trained with
He
wooden
is proving that an African nation can look the most powerful corporations on earth in the eye and say no. If Burkina Faso successfully rejects this model, if they manage to feed their people using indigenous methods and native seeds, the
He's
illusion
preparing
of
for
Western
pressure.
indispensability
The Black Winter
will
is
shatter
approaching.
permanently.
Terrorism is
The
adapting.
elite know that Mali is watching closely. Niger is watching. The entire alliance of Sahel states is watching. If one brick in the wall of dependency is removed, the entire structure risks collapse. Panic, as history shows, breeds aggression. A wounded empire is a dangerous empire.
Armored
Because
vehicles.
Burkina Faso dared to claim sovereignty over its own dirt, the globalist machine is actively assembling a massive, unprecedented $3 billion countermove to crush this rebellion before it can spread. They are preparing to make an example of Ibrahim Traoré. They are mapping out a strategy of total economic warfare designed to starve the nation into submission. Pause here. Write "thank you" in the comments to the farmers like Usman, who are on the front lines of this struggle. Your words matter in a world that tries to silence them. The conflict unfolding right now is no longer about farming, and it is certainly no longer about the technicalities of crop yields or agricultural data.
This isn't
It
some
has
vague
escalated
metaphor.
into a brutal,
It's a forecast.
unforgiving clash between the fundamental right of national sovereignty and the insatiable appetite of the globalist corporate machine. The Western powers are currently mobilizing a coordinated $3 billion pressure campaign against Ouagadougou. This is not a random number pulled from the air by frustrated politicians. It is a carefully calculated financial siege designed to destabilize the Burkinabe economy, isolate its leadership, and force Captain Ibrahim Traoré to his knees. Look closely at the mechanics of this retaliation, because it reveals exactly how the modern empire maintains its grip. In the sterile, glass-walled conference rooms of Geneva, high-paid lawyers representing massive biotechnology consortiums are actively drafting unprecedented trade complaints to submit to the World Trade Organization. They are constructing elaborate legal arguments, claiming that Burkina Faso has violated international free trade agreements by banning their genetically modified products. But we must understand what free trade actually means to these institutions. To the globalist elite, free trade simply means they are free to
Couldn't
extract your
stop
wealth,
them. The
free
North
to patent
collapsed
your
almost
natural
over.
resources, and free to destroy your local industries. The moment a sovereign nation stands up and decides to protect its own people, its own soil, and its own economic future, that nation is immediately branded as a rogue state, violating the rules-based international order. Simultaneously, in the labyrinthine corridors of the European Union in Brussels, unelected bureaucrats are quietly preparing a devastating package of secondary sanctions. They are threatening to impose crippling tariffs on Burkina Faso's other crucial exports, specifically targeting the agricultural and mining sectors that keep the country afloat. They are sending a clear, mafia-style message across the Mediterranean. The message is simple. If you do not buy our seeds on our terms, if you do not allow our chemical companies to dominate your landscape, we will not allow you to sell your cotton, your gold, or any of your natural resources on the global market. We will shut you out of the system. We will turn your borders into a financial prison. Furthermore, international development banks and foreign aid organizations, which often operate as the financial enforcement arm of Western foreign policy, are suddenly threatening to pull their funding for local infrastructure. They are halting the construction of roads. They are freezing the budgets for regional hospitals. They are pulling the plug on water purification initiatives, citing deep concerns over what they call a hostile and unpredictable business environment. They are attempting to weaponize poverty. They are using the threat of infrastructure collapse to starve a sovereign nation into absolute submission.
20.
You have to understand the sheer,
Isn't
breathtaking
propaganda.
arrogance of this strategy. The globalist elite operate on the deeply ingrained assumption that money is the ultimate dictator of human behavior. They believe that because they control the central banks, the international tribunals, and the global shipping lanes, they hold the power of life and death over the developing world. There is an old, dark philosophy in Washington, often attributed to the architects of Cold War diplomacy. If you
Were
control the
done,
oil, you
and
control
demanded
nations.
resources.
But if you
He'd
control
seen
the
the
food,
lie.
you control the people. For decades, the West has used food not as a humanitarian resource,
And for the first
but as
time
a
in
strategic
decades,
weapon of compliance. When a foreign corporation owns the biological patent to the seeds planted in your soil, they effectively own your foreign policy. If your government votes the wrong way at the United Nations, your seed shipments are mysteriously delayed. If your leader
Quietly,
refuses to
they
host
gave
a
them
foreign
wooden
military
rifle.
base, the price of the proprietary fertilizer required for those seeds suddenly doubles overnight. It is an invisible digital leash wrapped
Mobilization,
tightly around the throat
coups,
of the African
assassination.
continent. Ibrahim Traoré recognized this leash for exactly what it was. He saw that political
No
independence
ads,
without
no
food
sponsors with
independence
agendas.
is nothing
Just
but a theatrical illusion. a shadow play designed to pacify the masses while their pockets are picked.
with
He
action,
remembered the history.
but with speeches.
He remembered how foreign agricultural giants had previously promised miracles with genetically modified cotton in Burkina Faso, only to see the quality of the native crop destroyed and thousands of farmers driven into inescapable debt. He learned that aid is often just a high-interest loan with your dignity as collateral. The cycle of exploitation ends now. The contracts were signed. The Western victory seemed complete for 40 years. Yet, 3 months after Traoré's decree, the gold kept flowing. But the heart of the nation began to beat to a different drum. How could sovereignty be declared when the wealth was still being stolen through invisible wires? The answer lies in the invisible architecture of power. And that architecture was about to be exposed. The world was about to find out that fighting a man who is not afraid to lose everything is the most dangerous game in the world. This was only the beginning of the siege. When the West threatened a $3 billion blockade, Ibrahim Traoré did not panic. He did not step in front of the cameras to issue emotional threats or frantic pleas for mercy. He did not call for an emergency summit to beg for a stay of execution. Instead, he simply pivoted his entire national strategy back to the dirt. He is betting the absolute survival of his government, his military, and his nation on the profound resilience of his own people. He is methodically bypassing the global financial systems designed to keep them perpetually dependent. Across the sun-baked plains of Burkina Faso, a massive grassroots mobilization is underway, the likes of which the African continent has not seen in generations.
When Burkina Faso
This is not a top-down bureaucratic program managed by consultants in
was a
suits.
massacre in slow motion.
This is a survivalist revolution. The government is actively reviving indigenous seed banks, tracking down and multiplying the traditional, drought-resistant crop varieties that sustain the Burkinabe people for centuries, long before the foreign corporations ever arrived with their laboratory-engineered promises. These are seeds that have been tested
A
not
system
in a
choice.
sterile European
Then
laboratory,
2011 happened.
but by the
Libya
unforgiving,
collapsed.
brutal
NATO
climate
destroyed
of the Sahel itself. These are seeds that do not require expensive chemical fertilizers imported from abroad. Most importantly, they are seeds of freedom. They can be saved from one harvest and planted the next,
expelled French and
returning the
American
power of
forces.
biological
The world
reproduction
called it reckless.
directly
Next
to
one
the hands
below.
of the farmer. The locked cycle of corporate debt has been smashed by the simple act of planting what is local. If you believe these stories deserve depth and that independent voices need a platform to speak truth to power, become a member. Join Pan-Africa Spotlight. Your support ensures these narratives are never silenced. Usman, the veteran farmer we spoke of earlier, is no longer a solitary debtor trapped in a corporate scheme, staring at a barren field he does not truly own. He is now part of a rapidly expanding
weapons
network of
delivered
indigenous
direct-
farming cooperatives, supported directly by the state. The military government of Burkina Faso is deploying
Changing.
agricultural engineers across the countryside, not to enforce corporate compliance or
Waiting for
collect debts
rescue
for
to an
foreign
offensive
banks,
force ready
but
to
to
act.
work shoulder to
And it's-
shoulder with traditional farmers. They are combining modern soil science, water conservation techniques, and organic farming methods with ancestral knowledge. They are building irrigation canals with local stone. They are fortifying the soil naturally. They are preparing to feed their own nation without a single grain of imported, genetically modified seed. This is not just a shift in farming techniques. It is an economic rebellion disguised as an agricultural policy. Traoré is methodically severing the arteries of foreign extraction, one field at a time. But
Worse
he is
than the
also a
chaos that
realist.
destroyed Libya
He knows
and
that a
flooded the
landlocked
region with
nation
weapons
cannot
and
survive
fighters.
a massive
The Black
international
Winter
siege
includes
entirely alone. And this is where the sheer geopolitical genius of the new West African reality comes into play. Burkina Faso is no longer an isolated island waiting to be picked off by Western sanctions. It is a founding pillar of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a revolutionary military and economic pact forged with its immediate neighbors, Mali and Niger. As the European Union threatens to choke off external trade routes, and as the World Trade Organization prepares its punitive tribunals, the Alliance of Sahel States is rapidly hardening its internal borders into a unified, impenetrable economic fortress. Traoré, along with Assimi Goïta of Mali, and Abdurrahmane Tiani of Niger, are establishing new, self-reliant trade routes that do not require the permission, the currency, or the oversight of Paris, Brussels, or Washington. If the West refuses to buy Burkinabe cotton because of the seed ban, the domestic textile mills being built in Mali will buy it. If the West attempts to block agricultural imports to starve Ouagadougou, the fertile southern regions of the Sahel will
Strategically
supply
naked.
the arid north.
The result
They
is
are
what we
actively
see
creating
now.
a closed-loop
Weapons arriving
regional
without
economy,
apology.
backed by the
Soldiers
shared
training
military
without limits.
strength of 3 battle-hardened armies. The massive convoys of transport trucks moving across the borders between Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey are no longer carrying foreign aid distributed by Western, non-governmental organizations. They are carrying regional solidarity.
When Mali started
They are
buying
carrying
weapons with
native
its own
grains.
gold,
They are
the
carrying
world
locally
states
refined gold. They are carrying domestically produced goods. They are proving, day by day, that the artificial borders drawn by European colonial powers over a century ago at the Berlin Conference are finally being erased by the sheer will of a united people. Traoré is essentially looking at the globalist establishment and delivering a message that chills them to the bone. He is telling the West, you can keep your $3 billion. You can keep your patented seeds. You can keep your conditional aid, your predatory loans, and your hypocritical trade tribunals. We will eat what we grow. We will wear what we weave. We will mine what sits beneath our feet. And we will defend what is ours with our own blood. But the pressure is mounting. Behind the scenes, the threats are moving from economic to existential. He stood at the ultimate crossroads. One path: compromise, stability, survival. The path of the puppet. The other path: confrontation, chaos,
out.
and perhaps
Military
martyrdom.
agreements terminate.
The call came at 3 a.m. 7 words were spoken. They would define not just his fate, but the fate of millions of Africans watching his every move. What he said next, there was no going back from. The world held its breath, for the quiet leader was about to speak, and his words would do more than just ban a seed. They would declare the birth of a new world. The Western powers are currently slamming headfirst into a terrifying, immovable reality. They are learning a very hard, very bitter truth that dying empires throughout history have always learned too late. You simply cannot sanction a people who are no longer afraid of you. You cannot use the threat of poverty against men and women who have already survived the absolute worst that the world has to offer, and who have decided
Anyone
that their
willing to
dignity
sell without
is
strings
worth more
attached.
than a foreign loan. The corporate elite in Brussels and the intelligence analysts in Washington assumed that the threat of a $3 billion economic shock would cause the citizens of Burkina Faso to riot in the streets. They assumed that the people would rise up against their military government out of fear, isolation, and hunger. They assumed that financial pain would break the African spirit and force a return to the status quo. They severely miscalculated. The pressure from the West has not fractured the nation. It has only forged a stronger, unbreakable bond between Ibrahim Traoré and the people he leads. Burkina Faso has drawn a massive, undeniable line in the Saharan sand, and that line is drawn with their own native seeds. They have chosen the difficult, painful path of true independence.
And this
over
time,
comfortable
the Sahel
gilded
will
cage
not
of
collapse
corporate servitude. They have collectively decided that it is far better to eat a modest meal grown by a free man than to feast at a grand banquet provided by a master who holds a chain around your neck. Tell us where you're watching from. Pan-Africa Spotlight sends you strength and light. We are a community built on the truth that the mainstream refuses to broadcast. But this profound historical victory leaves the rest of the world with a haunting, prophetic question for the future. It is a question that is undoubtedly echoing through the classified halls of the Pentagon, the boardrooms of global banks,
No permission,
and the headquarters
no
of
approval,
the International
no
Monetary
excuses.
Fund tonight.
And yesterday,
If this
we
supposedly
saw the
fragile,
results.
landlocked African nation
New.
can endure a massive $3 billion counterattack just to take back control of their own soil, what will they reclaim next? The ban on genetically modified seeds is not the final battle. It is merely the opening salvo in a much larger, much more dangerous war for absolute liberation. The elite know that if you lose control of the food, you lose control of the nation.
This wasn't a
But
parade.
the inverse is
It wa-
also true. If a nation controls its food, it suddenly gains the courage to control everything else. Will they turn their eyes from the agricultural fields to the mining sectors and fully reclaim the thousands of tons of gold, lithium, and uranium currently being
Where
extracted
Mali's
by
gold
foreign
funded foreign
conglomerates
banks,
at
while its
pennies on the
soldiers
dollar?
held wooden guns.
Will they finally
A system
detonate
where
the
France
ultimate
decided
weapon of
bought with
colonial
Malian
control,
gold,
the
no permitted
CFA
what Mali
franc
could buy
currency,
when it
and
could
issue
act,
their own
and
sovereign
how
money
much it could
backed by
spend
their
on its own
massive natural
defense.
resources and their own gold reserves? The dominoes are already falling across the continent, and the globalist machine is entirely powerless to stop the momentum of a people who have finally awakened to their own strength. Ibrahim Traoré has proven to the world that the emperor has no clothes. He has exposed the fact that the illusion of Western indispensability was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie maintained through debt, coercion, and fear. The spell has been broken. The silent revolution is no longer silent. But do not be fooled into thinking the road ahead is paved with ease. A wounded empire does not retreat quietly into the night. Even now, as we speak, the machinery of subversion is grinding. They will try to divide the alliance of Sahel states. They will try to bribe the generals. They will try to manipulate the markets to make the price of native grain unbearable. They are waiting for the first sign of weakness, the first crack in the resolve of the Burkinabe people. This is why your witness matters. Subscribe. Not for us, but for the next chapter, refusing to be silenced. Walk this road with us. For the story of Burkina Faso is the story of every soul yearning to break free from an invisible leash. What Ibrahim Traoré represents is a shift in the very DNA of leadership. He is the quiet architect of a new world order, where sovereignty is not a gift granted by a global tribunal, but a right seized by the hands that work the soil. He has shown that the greatest weapon against an empire is not a nuclear missile, but a native seed and the will to plant it. As the sun sets over the red dust of Ouagadougou, the shadow of the colonial past is growing shorter, while the light of a self-determined future is beginning to dawn. The West may have the banks, the courts, and the carriers, but Burkina Faso has the earth. And in the end, the earth always wins. The soil remembers. It remembers the hands that bled for it, the voices that cried for it, the generation that finally reclaimed it. Can sovereignty survive in a world built on extraction? Can dignity outlast the appetites of empires? The answer is being written now, not in the halls of Geneva, but in the fields of the Sahel. The answer is being written by men like Ousmane and leaders like Traoré. The answer is being written in every heartbeat of a nation that has decided to stop begging and start building. The question is no longer what the West will do to Africa. The question is, what will you do now that you know the truth? What single detail in this geopolitical chess match changes the whole story for you, and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let us build a community of truth seekers. Thank you for standing with the truth. Keep your eyes open and stay vigilant, for the world is changing before our very eyes, and the soil finally belongs to those who love it.